Welcome to the second part of the presentation that describes the use of Helix WinNet. This part discusses the data you need to prepare before starting data entry into Helix WinNet. This presentation is not meant to be a complete manual, so please check the PPS protocol and codebook if you have any problems. If this does not solve the problem, then contact the WIV-ISP. Will be the data that you will be trying to collect during the PPS. This is mainly three form types, which we will first briefly show and then talk about in more detail. The first is a list of wards that will participate in the PPS. Their code, which you will give to them yourself, the full name of the ward, which again you can choose yourself, and the code that is supplied by the codebook for that specific type of ward. In our example, we've chosen ICU1, ICU2, the name of it, and we've looked for the code in the codebook. The second type of information that you will need is Form H, also called the form of hospital data. The third type of form is Form A, known as the patient data form. Now we will discuss these last two in more detail. First, the Form H, hospital data. For every site that will participate in the PPS on its own, you will fill in one of these forms. If you are using several sites but are only doing one data entry, then you will have to fill in only one form but make a combination for the different sites. We here have a hospital code 123. The hospital code is the third trusted party code. In other words, for instance, if your NSEH code would be 9999, you will not be using this code. This is because the PPS will done completely anonymously. The TTP code is only known by you. That means that if you lose your TTP code, you will have to be given a new code. The third trusted party gives out these TTP codes, but will destroy the link between the hospital name and the hospital code after sending you the data. This is to protect the third trusted party, but also to protect your anonymity. In our example, the hospital 123 is being filled in. If you choose to do data entry for several sites, you will make a merger of the several codes. For instance, hospital site 123 and 124, you will fill in hospital code 123124. This way we still know which TTP codes are participating. All the TTP codes are three-letter codes. We strongly advise you to do data entry per site. The survey date is the next field. You will fill in when the data collection started and when the data collection ended. In our example, the 8th of August until the 20th of August 2011. The entry of the data into Helix WinNet should not be counted. This is purely data collection on the wards. The next fields are hospital size in total number of beds, the number of acute care beds, and the number of ICU beds. This deserves some clarification because it will not be the exact number that you will fill in. Again, for anonymous reasons, you will fill in a number that is actually rounded up. For the first two, being the total number of beds and the total number of acute care beds, you will round up to the first 25. For instance, if your total number of beds is 476, you will round up to 500. You never round down. The number of acute care beds, if the number is 401, you will round up to 425. If the number is 400, obviously you will stay at 400. The number of ICU beds, however, will be rounded up to the first 5. If you have 6 beds, it will be 10. If you have 14 beds, it will be 15, and so on. The next question is whether or not you've decided to exclude certain wards for the PPS. The protocol clearly describes what types of wards should be included, but it is possible that you've decided also to exclude other wards. If you excluded no wards, if you've decided to exclude no wards, fill in no. However, if you have decided to exclude certain wards, mark yes and write down the names of the wards excluded. As you can see, our total hospital size is 500 beds, and the number of acute care beds is 450. In other words, there are 50 chronic beds in our acute care hospital. This is the ward that we decided to exclude. There is, in other words, in our fictitious hospital, one chronic care ward, and this should be excluded according to the protocol. The next questions will be about the total number of beds included in the ward and the total number of patients included in the PPS. Theoretically, if you do not exclude any of the acute care beds, this number will be the same as the one that you gave above. In other words, the total number of beds included in the ward will be the same as the number of acute care beds in your hospital. If this differs, you'll have to specify this here. The total number of patients included in the PPS will only be known after you've done the total data entry, obviously, the total data collection. In the next field, you will be asked to choose your hospital type. The protocol gives you some guidance as to whether your hospital will be a primary, secondary, or tertiary hospital, but we understand that this is not a very easy question. Next, you will be asked to give 7 variables for your hospital, and these are data that will not be available for 2011. You may therefore mark for what year these data are valid. In our example, we decided to give data for 2009. After having filled these in, you will also be asked to mark for each of them whether they are only for the included wards or whether they are for the entire hospital, in other words, the total hospital size. For our example, we decided to give the first variables for the entire hospital and the last variable only for the included wards. This is not a best practice, but simply an example to illustrate the difference. The last 2 variables are the number of full-time equivalent infection control staff. Because HelixWinNet will only allow commas to be used for decimals, we advise you to already do the data preparation with commas and not dots. For instance, 2.5 will be 2,5, 1.8 should be 1,8. Then last you will be asked to clarify where the data apply to. In our case, we will already know this because the single hospital will only have a hospital code of 3 digits, whereas a hospital trust or merger will have more than 3 digits. For instance, if you are doing data entry for 2 sites, but for the 2 sites together, then you will have a hospital code of 6 numbers. Again, we strongly advise you to do data entry per site. There is on the form theoretically an option to fill in light or standard protocol. However, for the PPS protocol Belgium, only the standard will be available. During the pilot phase in Belgium, it was seen that the data collection of the light version is just as much work as the data collection of the standard version. The difference is that in the data entry, it is a bit less work to do the light version. However, in the number of hours, that does not differ that much. The feedback, however, becomes much less interesting for the light version, and therefore it's been decided that the Belgian hospitals will only use the standard version. Last, there is a field, comments and observation. However, this field will not be used. There is in the current version of HelixWinNet a problem with this field, which means we cannot guarantee that your comments will get to us. And if you have any problems or comments, we would also prefer that you email these directly to us so that we can take up the issue with you. Otherwise, if you fill them in Form H, we will of course only get them after the PPS, but also they will be anonymized, which means we cannot answer you.